Yay! So if you are with me, I would love it if you would pose a question, put in a comment, anything about networking. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I have a whole chapter about it in my new book, ebook launched today, Succeed Without Selling. And those of you who know me know my goal is that we do things better than maybe we were doing before or that other people are doing, so we get better results. Networking is one of those things that's sort of changing with this whole pandemic thing. So shut down, all of a sudden, what the heck, right? We can't go to in-person things. Then they start slowly rolling out. Maybe you can go to something with 10 people. Maybe you can go to something with a few more people. Conferences rescheduled or canceled. So the question becomes, what do we do? What are the networking behaviors that we participate in that maybe we were participating before that still work? And what are some new ones that we have to adapt? And then what are we doing that's working? And are we doing anything that isn't really getting us the results that we want? So I know that's a lot of questions, but I am really curious to hear what kinds of things you're thinking. You should be able to put comments in and post them, and then I should be able to read them. I am going to, until questions and comments are got, I'd like to know what people are doing that's working for them. I know for me, once we went totally virtual, I had to think about things a little differently because I do some stuff virtually, but wow, all of a sudden we had all of these networking events online, these Zoom meetings that we could go to. And I found that I could participate in a lot more because a lot of my time had been freed up, but also because it was easier. So all of a sudden, we've got stuff going on that really gives us the opportunity to try things out. And so that's my first tip, actually, that no matter what is going on in the world, whether we are pandemic, not pandemic, exploring opportunities, exploring groups, exploring events, organizations to see what resonates with you is a really good practice. And especially if you've been involved in organizations for a really long time, if you're starting to feel like they're not getting you new results, like you've made the relationships you're going to make and you love those people and you're going to stay connected to them, whether you go to events or not, it might be time to start looking at other things. So Jan, thank you. Jan's question is, what is the best way to transition from Zoom to live in-person gatherings? I'm going to say slowly. So the first thing is we have to think about what are the limitations on live events right now. There are huge limitations on live events right now. So let's say, okay, so you can have maybe 10 people. So I think you want to think about who those 10 people are and how you can be connecting them to each other for right now. Or maybe it's 10 people who you've been building a relationship with online over the past couple of months, and maybe you want to bring them together for a conversation. My vote is figure out how to play with our social distancing. So 6 feet, masks, will there be food, won't there be food? We have to think about all of these things. And I think those of us who can figure that out and then set it up are going to do really well with that. We're going to be sort of at the forefront. So are you going to be able to go back to 40 people in a room, 100 people in a room? Not for a while. So let's think about it differently. And interestingly, when there's 40 people in a room, they're all not meeting each other. So that's okay. So some small gatherings might actually be better. So Colleen, hi Colleen. I have people asking about hosting networking events at our Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm not sure how to respond or if people would even feel comfortable coming in somewhere for face-to-face networking. Yeah, it's really interesting. Oddly, Colleen, I was thinking about your place, thinking about, doing something like in one of those back spaces. This, I think, goes along with my response to Jan, which is, Colleen, if you can figure out a format that respects the social distancing rules and maybe even make it fun. So a buffalo is potentially 6 feet long if it was laying down. I have a feeling cows are, because I've seen that being used as a distancing measure. So maybe you get cardboard cutouts of buffaloes, or maybe you get, those floor stickers and put them in between the tables. So now people know what social distancing is. Maybe there's a way to use some sort of a, what's the word I'm thinking, like PA system or something, so that people can be sharing to the whole room. But you're going to do smaller gatherings. I mean, networking events are going to be smaller. They just are for right now. So let's lean into it. Let's see, how can we make it fun? How can we make it so engaging that the buzz gets out there that we're doing this? And Colleen, as a venue, you can be creating that package, figure out what the food is, figure out, how you're going to do drinks, and then offer that to these folks, and keep them relatively short. If people are uncomfortable, they're going to be uncomfortable if they have to be someplace for 2 hours. But if they can be there for 45 minutes or an hour, it's not a lot of time, but it helps people get the opportunity to sort of, fall back in. Hi, Anne. Social distancing, everyone orders their own food. Have a best mask contest. Like, that is a great idea. Or maybe you have design a mask, where you get just like blank masks and markers. Everyone has their own. Maybe it's branded for Buffalo Wild Wings, and people they come in with masks on, but then they get to create a mask, and maybe it's BW3 masks that have a place on them for people to get creative. And then everyone votes, and whoever wins gets a gift card or something. I like the way you're all thinking. Like, Anne, this is a great idea. Make it more interesting. Like, we can't do things the same way we were doing before. And I submit we probably need to shake it up a little bit. If we look for silver linings, there's no downside to becoming creative with how we are networking, how we are doing these things. We're sort of forced into it. So let's play, right? Let's figure out what we do. When it comes to large groups, break them down. Like NABO has a weekly, connect thing every Wednesday on Zoom. And after the first couple of minutes, they break us up into breakout rooms. So we're maybe in a room with maybe 3 other people. They're great conversations, and they're so much easier because people are really able to talk. If you've got 16 people on a call, then whoever is doing the call has to allow people to speak. And so there isn't a whole ton of engagement. Now, over in the chat room, people are engaging, which is nice. But when they break out into these breakout rooms, then we really get a chance to really get to know people. So what is the downside to having a smaller, and those calls are an hour, okay? So what is the downside to having a smaller gathering in person? What is the downside to maybe you could have 16 people, but they are in groups of 4, and you decide what the groups of 4 are, and they maybe, come in at different times. I just think we have to think all this through. Like anything, any new plan or strategy, we want to make sure we're thinking it through and we get that whole strategy down so that there are few surprises when it is time to have our event. And there have to be rules. So everyone has to wear a mask, right? Everyone has to have their own food. That, there's things they can't share, whatever those rules are. And maybe you start out really slow and you just have something where there is, sorry, Colleen, where there is no food, there are no drinks. You just get 4 people together and, it's just about summer. Maybe it's in a park. You respect the social distancing. And let's think about activities. So what are some activities that we could do with in-person networking that would help us build those relationships? Let's say it's a small group. Have you experienced anything that you really enjoyed, that you thought was a really great exercise, that given the constraints that we currently have, that might be a good idea for someone to engage in a networking environment? What do you think? I'll tell you one I participated in, and it was a blast and a half. It was that the question was asked, what if you, how did they ask the question? If you had to live in a movie for a year, what movie would it be and why? Okay. Now, thanks, Jan. It is a crazy question, I know. But it's fascinating. And you have to think about it. So, it's sort of out there. But it is so interesting, and you learn so much about people because then everyone gets to say, what their movie is and why. Another exercise you can do, though, with social distancing, you'd have to get pretty creative with it, is when people register for the event, you ask them for one little known fact. We've done this before at some events where people have to share one little known fact. And then you create a sheet that it lists all the facts with lines across from them, and you have to figure out whose fact is whose. Now, that gets a little tricky with social distancing, but we all have cell phones. So wouldn't it be interesting to figure out a way to use the cell phone? So for example, say everyone had to give their cell phone number when they registered, and that was, given to everyone who attended. Another, keep it small. And so people could text each other asking the questions. That could be sort of fun, as opposed to yelling across the room. There's also these things called, oh, you wouldn't be able to do that. Never mind. I was going to say there's these things called thumb balls, where you throw the ball and whoever catches it wherever their thumb hits, that's the question they have to answer, but you can't do it with social distancing. Rats. Until everyone gets, antibody tested, and then maybe you can. I don't know. So these are really great questions. I am curious about what other questions, or what are you doing? What things have you found that are working. And while we are talking about it, I am going to just put a note in here. There we go. So let's think. Let's think about this maybe a little differently. In your experience, when it comes to networking, what have you seen that works and what have you seen that doesn't work in the past? And then like the follow-on question is, how do those things change? Do they change at all? Do they become different as we, are dealing with life different? If you follow that. Any thoughts on that? One of your best hacks, one of your best tips? Well, while you're thinking about it, I will tell you some things that, something that keeps crossing my mind about as we head out of this and into being in person again. Yeah, so Colleen, I like Zoom meetings just when they're organized, and that depends on the presenters. I know, I agree. I think everyone dove into it, because what are you going to do? Okay, we have to get on Zoom. And a lot of people had no idea. Like I had no idea there were breakout rooms until I heard about them and then got to experience them by other people doing it. So interestingly, like everyone's been in this learning phase. And I think the vast majority of people have been pretty forgiving. I mean, I can think of one guy in the grocery store who was having a fit because he had to stand behind the line. But for the most part, we're all being pretty tolerant of each other and each other's learning curves and the stuff that's going on. But embracing the technology and, sort of embracing the situation, saying, okay, this is where we are. This is always going to be an opportunity. So let me really learn it. I think is, an outstanding idea for all of us, especially those of us who live in the North, because there are times when the weather is so bad that we can't get where we need to go. Having an online option would be awesome. We'd be able to continue on. Colleen, a formal training in person might be a thought. Will you tell me a little bit more about that? Like what you're thinking, like what kind of formal in-person training? I would love to do training again in person, and I am waiting for the day that happens. When it comes to networking, one of the things I'm thinking is, I wonder, doing a lunch and learn. Well, you know how much I love a good lunch and learn. Now, the great thing about, I think people could start doing lunch and learns. It would be with however many people you're allowed to have. Right, exactly. Social distancing would be easy for that. It really would, because you could put, the people apart from each other. The trainer would be in the front of the room. So everyone could, respect the social distancing rules. Yeah, there's no reason why we can't still do that. Let me ask you guys a question, because I'm thinking that when we go back to in-person networking, like networking events, do you think we're going to share business cards? Do you think those people who had a habit when they went to something of handing business cards to everybody are still going to do that? And if they do, are people going to take those business cards? Or are they going to say, no, thank you? Because there's also some thoughts that we are not going to be shaking hands. We're going to be doing this, which I am all for, because it's so much calmer. So what about those business cards? I just ordered a whole bunch, so I really, curious about this question. If you're just joining us, you can put comments in the comment place. Would love to. Oh, pictures of business cards. Yeah, that's interesting. So what would you do? You'd text it over to them and then they'd have it? Because you don't want your phone touching their phone. Oh, hi, Janet. Maybe organizers will need to email attendees lists with emails instead. Uh, that's so interesting. Yeah, but then, okay, so let's think about this for a minute. Let's really beat this up, because if the organizer emails everybody the list of emails of who attended, are we going to have those people who are then going to try and solicit everybody who attended because now they have their email? Are they going to be putting everyone on their email marketing list? And so, right, you're an ink and paper person, so you had to learn Zoom, but how do you see, have you guys talked at all about marketing, like handouts and things like that? Like if we start doing conferences again and people have exhibit tables, what's gonna, happen there? Are we gonna have things on the table that people are going to be able to take? Will people take them? Will we get to a point where none of this will really matter, which I'm really hoping we do. But part of my reason for asking all of these questions is the way that we network has a lot to do with what we believe networking is for and what people are going to, what people think they're going to get out of it. That philosophy impacts how they behave when they're networking. And you guys know me. As far as I can tell, everyone on this knows me. And Janet, or maybe a list of names, and everyone has to go on LinkedIn and do their own research. Now that's a good idea. We'll see how motivated they are to do it. So you guys know me, and I don't like the idea of thinking that networking is about getting a sale. I think we do ourselves and the other people at an event a disservice if that's how we're looking at it, because what we miss is who is really there and what role could they possibly be playing in our business, right? They could be a client, but they could be a good referral source, or they could be a good resource for our contacts, or maybe they just become a friend. Maybe they're just an accountability partner or someone like a sounding board, someone we can bounce things off of. Maybe they're awful and we don't want to have anything to do with them. But the only way we really know that is when we just walk in without any preconceived ideas about what's going to happen. And so I just wonder if people are going to figure that out. I wonder if people are going to figure out that because of social distancing, because some things are going to take a little more work and effort, that they want to be thinking about it differently, and they want to be engaging with people in a more meaningful way. So it's like going to the grocery store. It's harder now. So you got to just be really prepared. People don't go as often because there's so much more to it. Well, I think networking, there's going to be so much more to it. And that's what I'm curious about. I have my beliefs about how we should be networking. And then I look at, that everything's online right now. And then we're going to be coming out of this. And what is that going to look like? And I just, I wonder, how are we going to engage moving forward? Or what are our concerns about what's going to happen moving forward? What do you guys think? Or what other ideas can we come up with here that then we can share with other people? What do we think? Are you going to go to networking events when they're, as things open up? So like Janet and Colleen, if you are still with me, when, at some point we're going to go back to having our meetings, and when and how are we going to do that? Are we going to leave every other seat empty? Are we, going to have guests? What are we thinking? How are we going to play this game so that everyone feels comfortable? Or do we just keep them virtual for a period of time till we can see, what plays out? Oh, Lori, trying to figure out virtual fundraising. You know what? Let's talk about that in a minute. So, because that's really interesting. I was thinking about you the other day because I was thinking about the idea that was presented about doing the purse swap thing, and I was thinking, wow, it'd be great to make that some sort of a virtual event. And Colleen, how does a group create a comfort level for people? I know this is really the question, right? I mean, there's a lot of questions, but when we think about networking and which we're all talking about, how do we? I think if the coordinator, the organizer, is really organized, Colleen, as you were saying before, really has a system down, really makes a decision about how they're going to conduct the program and how they're going to not only ensure social distancing, but make it fun, make it an engaging process. I think those people are going to create a comfort level much faster than other organizations, because you have to deal with it. It's the elephant in the room, right? You have to deal with it. So how do you do it in a way that respects what's going on, acknowledges what's going on, and still, gets people together? I think we have to get really creative about it. Yeah, Janet, it's a good question. How can you be comfortable with people, now we're not seeing our close friends right now either, though our kids are. My personal belief is that if we could do more antibody testing just across the board, that might lighten it up a little bit. It might. I really think it's the social distancing thing. I think if an event organizer said, we're going to have an event, we're going to try it out with a small group of people, we're going to be physically distant, everyone has to wear a mask, and here's, what we're going to do, there will be people who will go, and then, you either wait a couple weeks to see if there's fallout, or not. It's sort of weird for me because, I go to the grocery store. There's a ton of people in the grocery store. I don't know who any of those people are. So, and I haven't. I mean, I think I already had it, but I don't think people. We're not seeing a lot of people going to the grocery store and then all of a sudden coming down with it. Are you making the current situation like it is always going to be? Oh, you know what, Anne? Thank you for that. It may sound like I'm doing that. The reason why we're talking about it this way is because we don't know how long this is going to be the situation. So if you think about it, states are opening up. Many of them are doing it slowly. Ohio is doing it slowly. So it is going to be a while before we are back to something that looks like normal. So our choices are, I'm really glad that you said that, because this is a really huge point in my mind. Our choices are, we can wait until the all clear and then just go back to business as it used to be, or we can say, I need to deal with this now. I want to be able to get out and do in-person networking. I want to, hi Marilee, I want to be able to engage with people one-on-one, face-to-face. So I have to figure out how I can do that in a way that is comfortable. That's what I'm saying. For some people, I mean, we still have to look at what are the things that we do virtually to be networking. I've had a ton of people say to me, well, you know, I it's funny. I'll read it in a minute, Marilee. Um, I've built my business with around in-person networking, so I don't know what to do. Okay, you've got to move it virtual. Thank God this happened where we have technology that we can use to give us, the ability to see each other, even if we're not in the same room. So I just think if we think about what's possible as opposed to what isn't possible, I think we're in a better place. And I'll come back to you in a second. Marilee, our social media marketing company has been inviting us to virtual happy hours and teaching us best practices at the same time. It's so great. Since all of their customers are Dale Carnegie franchises, it's fun because we get to see our colleagues from around the country, and our vendor, Impact Social Media, is teaching us tips like how to use virtual backgrounds, how to light your room, interactive exercises. Yeah. So, and let me see, does this go even longer? No. Okay. So there we go. Marilee, this is sort of, part of why I wanted to have this conversation around networking, because there are so many opportunities virtually to be able to network and with people around the world that we maybe hadn't thought of before, but then being in the situation, we end up not having a choice. And then we are going to be slowly getting back out into the world. And we want to be thinking about what are the ways we can do that? What are the ways that we can have events again that work, right? So, like on the one we have Anne saying, if I can go to a restaurant with 9 other people, why not 9 other business associates? That is exactly right. When I started this conversation with, you start out small, you start out with what you can do, and maybe you invite very specifically, very strategically, people who you think should know each other, that you want to get to know better and you think might be able to benefit from being, getting to know each other. I just think for right now, you've got to be respectful of what's going on and set it up in a way that is fun and gets people to want to do it, to not feel uncomfortable, and which, brings me back to making sure you really have a plan. There's a difference between saying, okay, hey, let's just all get together, and saying, okay, I'm putting together this event. I'm only inviting you folks. I want to see how we can, further get to know each other. I think there'd be value for you guys in getting to know each other, and I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. So here's what we're going to do. And you tell them what the plan is. People are going to be much more comfortable with that kind of thing. And we have Lori Inks, who says, they're trying to figure out virtual fundraising. So for an organization that does a lot of in-person fundraising, now all of a sudden, that doesn't necessarily exist. So, I want all of us participating in this. This is like an opportunity for us to help each other come up with ideas. I will say, Lori, my first thought is think about how you can do one of those ideas virtually, right? Like you could do the purse thing virtually. It would be interesting and there'd be a lot of mechanics to it, but you could absolutely do it. You can do like Lakewood Alive is doing a virtual meltdown instead of an in-person one. It's a 5K. They're doing a virtual one because they don't really have a choice right now. So I think, we have to think about these things a little differently, and that's okay. But yeah, so Anne, absolutely. See, I see that, silver linings, right? This is so great that we have been forced to embrace this technology so that now we have the ability to work in both worlds. At the same time, we get to think about things a little differently. Like, Marilee is saying, she loves the idea of inviting friends and associates that you would like to meet each other. What better way to be of value to your network? We think we have to get 100 people in a room in order to have a significant event. And we don't. We could have a very targeted, specific event that could be really impactful. Wait, what is this? Wow, I just thought of this. Right now, if you don't walk in with your group, you can't join anyone. Also, you must be sitting down if you have any food or drink. I think I just shut down hosting anything until that changes. Yeah. Okay. Good point. So maybe you're not ready for that right now. Or maybe what you do is, Colleen, maybe what you do is you say to one of these groups, okay, you all have to come in together. You have to, they're really going to want to all come in together. This is another reason for doing something small. I got to tell you, if I picked 3 people who I thought should be getting to know each other, we could all get there at the same time. We all know, or I know all of them. We can stand 6 feet apart from each other. We could all go in, sit down, and have a great conversation. So is it doable? Yes. Is it more complicated? Yes. Young Life did a virtual auction fundraiser. Okay. I don't know if any of you watched the Tiger Woods Phil Mickelson shootout. What was it, yesterday? No. Sunday? First of all, it was really great to see golf again. But they raised $20 million. I'm not saying you're going to raise $20 million, but they had auctions and all kinds of, silent auctions, and you could buy raffle tickets and stuff. Yeah, so I like the painted bench idea. I think this is my point. I have a lot of points, obviously, but one of them is we got to get creative. At the same time, we want to think about how can we continue to have meaningful conversations with people, to continue to build relationships, whether virtually or in person, so that we can continue to build that community around our business. Marilee said, a minute ago, doing something like this. That is exactly right. So I want to do a quick pause and have each of you write in the chat room what the value you bring to your audience. So say your name, your company, and the value that you bring to your audience. I want you to write it in the chat room, because this is an opportunity for you to be networking. I don't know if you all know each other, but people are popping in and out of this thing, and this is an opportunity for people to, engage with each other. So go to it. I'm going to take a drink of water. You better be typing. How come I'm not seeing anybody? Oh, come on, you guys, really? Do you all know each other? Ah, thank you, Marilee. Excellent. And yes, you do. Very good. Lori, still with us? Janet? Yeah, that's great, Janet, both in the office and working remotely. Yeah. So like that was a shift kind of thing. And now coming out of this, how are people going to be working, right? Are they going to be working? Are they going to stay working remotely? Will some of them be working remotely and others be working live? Lori Inks, we are looking for community support. Okay, but that wasn't my question. My question was, what is the value you bring to your audience? So, you know, yeah. Right, exactly. For this foreseeable future, that's exactly right. Um, the the deal is that none of us know, and that is part of the problem. That none of us know what the future holds or when. So, what we need to do is think about how we can work within the environment we find ourselves in. It was a shock to the system, and then it got sort of usual. It became, this thing that we're doing. So now what can we do? What can we be doing to get back into networking, to get back into engaging with people, that kind of thing? That's really, my question. And what are those behaviors that work? And what are the behaviors that don't work or that we think will work better in the future or not so much in the future? Thanks, Lori. Thank you, Anne. Very good. Anne, what's your company name? The company you work for? Exactly right, Colleen. That is exactly right. So if we think about when you were networking in the past and the kinds of places you would go. Thank you, Anne. And the sorts of events that you would attend, and maybe do like a debrief with yourself, where you think you sort of look back and ask yourself the question, how valuable is this? How valuable was this to my business? And if it was, all in person, whatever, okay, great. Who are the kinds of people that you met that you resonated with and continued to relationship build with? And I'm asking this question for a very specific reason, because if there were people who you would meet, who you would think, wow, you know what, this is someone I want to continue to engage with, I want to continue to get to know, and you would do that, the question becomes right now, how can you find those people online so that you can be having those sorts of discovery conversations, exploratory, conversations to see who's out there? I got a ton of ideas, but first I want to hear where you guys are at and what ideas you have. So, what do you think? Can you like picture like organizations you belong to or events you've been to where you think, wow, that was a great event. Walked away with like 2 people who I really felt an engagement with. And then I got another question for you, which is, where online have you been networking? So, have you been spending a lot of time on Facebook? Have you been connecting with people on LinkedIn? If you've been attending Zoom events and meetings, who was putting them on? Where are they coming from? Let's have an idea of what's going on out there. All right, well, I'm going to give you guys some ideas because that's part of the reason we're doing this. I would think that you could, have they really? The Chambers of Commerce we want to. Okay, great. So you've had these organizations putting events online, on Zoom, whatever, having topics of conversation, or, having, speakers, or just having, group conversations. So my question for you becomes, could you be convening a conversation? Could you pick a topic and say, reach out, like look through your LinkedIn connections and think about the people. Oh, I'd love to know how that was. Yeah, I like when there are topics too, Colleen. But it really begs the question, if there was a topic that you really liked, that you really enjoyed, let's say like so Marilee, Hal Becker, it's probably fascinating. If you looked through your LinkedIn connections and you looked for some who you're connected to, but you don't really know that all that well, what would happen if you invited them to a Zoom call, like a 30-minute Zoom call, to have a conversation around a topic, or just to do a round robin, just to, once again, I keep going back to this. If you thought of people who, it might be valuable for them to know each other or to at least meet each other, then you can create that conversation. And right now, you have a choice between in person or online, and you're always going to have that choice. I got to tell you, I think everything we've learned through this whole if there's one thing we've learned through this whole thing, it's that even in the dead of winter in Northeast Ohio, we are going to be able to have events. We're going to be able to bring people together. So, see, it's so great. So if you think about, let's think about this. Are there people you'd like to meet? Are there organizations that you have always wondered about, but you've never had the opportunity to check out? Are there certain industries that would potentially be good, could potentially be good referral sources for you and you for them? These are the kinds of questions we should be asking ourselves all the time in our business, but especially right now, when we could do things in person, networking was pretty easy. You picked events, there were a ton of them, sometimes multiple on a particular day. So you got to pick what you wanted to go to, and you could go and you could meet whoever you wanted to, and you could have conversations with people, and it was pretty easy. Now, lockdown, not so easy. Now we really have to think about it and create a strategy and a plan for how are we going to engage with people moving forward. If we're going to attend an online event, are we going to follow up with those people? Like if we hear somebody in a group, or we're in a breakout room with a small group and we're having a great conversation, what's the follow-up? Are we reaching out to those? Are we connecting with those people on LinkedIn? Are we reaching out to them through email or whatever, and saying, I'd really like to get to know you and your business a little bit more. How about if we jump on a coffee call, kind of thing? Like, what are we doing? Because networking, no matter where you're doing it, should have a goal. In my opinion, the goal should not be to get a client. It should be to make connections without any sort of agenda. And what are we going to do once we make that connection? So, like I said, when it was in person, it was fairly easy. Now we really have to work at it. So, what should we be doing? Or what are you doing? What is working? We want to pull from what have people learned in this experience, and what have they been doing that's working? What are they going to take with them moving forward? What's been a struggle? What's been a challenge? And what other ideas do we have? What other things can we do moving forward to maximize our networking opportunities and time? One of the things that I wrote in my book was about networking is there are two things that come to mind. The first one is that when you go to an event, you should go without an agenda and be totally open to who's there, because you never know who you might really engage with and who might end up being really valuable to you and or your business. The other thing that I wrote about is how we behave online, because I have seen that people seem to think that online networking is different from in-person networking, that getting on LinkedIn is an opportunity to sell to people you don't know. That once you make that connection, once you send the request and they accept it, suddenly you can pitch. Now, those people might be behaving that way in person. There's a good chance that they are, but it doesn't work. It's not good. And now that, until the foreseeable future, all of this is virtual, all of this is online networking, I think we really need to give some thought to what works and what makes us comfortable, what makes us uncomfortable, and who do we want to be having conversations with. I sort of look at this whole experience as we have a real opportunity to reach out to people and start a dialogue, start a conversation. A lot of people have a lot of time on their hands and might for a little while. So, how do you decide that now you're going to have a conversation with folks and start the process of getting to know them? Because think about it, you could really, I mean, I'll give you an example. I go to these NABO things every Wednesday, and I have met some really great women all over the country who I never would have met otherwise. And we show up every week and we're engaging and interacting with whatever the topic is. But then over in the chat, we're talking to each other, and it's fun. And it just gives you the opportunity to engage with people. And interestingly, then, there are people who are local to here who are also on those calls, and you get to know them too. And sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's not so much. Bye, Marilee. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all of your input. So, I think if we look at this and look at these opportunities and say, okay, I'm going to attend a couple different things I never attended before, things I never would have, and just see what is going on out there and who is out there, and then, take those one step further. I was on one of those calls, and someone put over in the chat room asking if anyone would be open to sharing their NABO experience. They're thinking about joining. So I said, I'm happy to. I'm happy to talk to you about that. So we emailed a little bit, but then we got on a call last week, and we had a great conversation. I think it was like an hour long, and we just got to know each other. She's in North Carolina. Just got to know each other's businesses, talked about all kinds of things. Then she introduced me to someone. So I helped her answer a question. And then she ended up introducing me to someone who might be potentially valuable for me and my business, a resource, not a client or anything, just a resource. So I think we have a lot of opportunities available to us, and I think we want to think about it and want to think about it that way. What can we do? What can we take advantage of? What can we maximize right now? And then what ideas can we develop for moving forward with how we're going to engage as time goes on? We got to be paying attention to what's happening. I just think waiting to see what happens, not necessarily a great thing. Colleen, for you, yeah, I think you got to wait to have these events until some of these restrictions ease up, because now maybe what you do is you figure out how to provide a virtual event where BW3 provides the food. You got to deliver it to the people who are going to be attending, and it's a little bit, and it may be cost prohibitive, but maybe it gets people into that, connecting those two things, BW3 with networking and having events. Maybe you do a virtual lunch and learn, and somehow you figure out, maybe whoever's going to do the teaching orders the food and gets it out there to the folks. I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas, because at some point we're going to land on stuff that's going to make sense. So that's why I really want to know what you guys are thinking too. I'm only going to have so many ideas, but we do want to think about how we're networking have we stopped? Did we give up on it when all of this happened? And if so, how can we get back into it? If not, what have we found that works? What have we found that doesn't seem to work so well? And how do we see it moving forward? Because a lot of it is still unknown, and that's okay. But I have this belief that you monitor what you can't control and you control what you can control. And in order to make that happen, you have to be paying attention, and you have to make decisions about what you're doing. So, let's give it some thought, and we'll take a quick little break since I've been doing this for an hour, and just give people a chance to breathe. Maybe a few more people might want to join us. So let's see. What do I want to say? Okay, taking a quick 5. Probably not even 5. Oh, that could just be me. All right, let's take a quick little break. I want to see one thing. Bye, gals. Thank you. Enjoyed spending some time with you. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow morning. Let's see. Well, okay. Oh, what else he can do? Let's read about networking from Succeed Without Selling. Page 43. Okay. Decide what your goal is. My vote is for a goal of building long-term, lasting relationships that may at some point lead to more business. Remember, you may never do business with the person you meet, but if you truly participate in relationship building, you just might do business with their connections over time. You may be wondering what you should be doing if you aren't selling. I find having a strategy helps prevent falling into the sales trap. The first thing you can do is decide where you should go. I'm reading from the pages of Succeed Without Selling about networking. So feel free to put comments in the chat room about what you do with networking, what's working for you and what isn't. The goal of this conversation has just been going on for like the past hour and something, with people popping in and out, is to come up with ideas on what works and what doesn't work and what's going to work moving forward. Because this is a whole new world that we're living in, and we got to get ready for probably another whole new world that we're going to be living in moving forward. So while we had a little break in the action, I thought I'd do a little reading about networking. Really, my vote is let's have a goal of just building relationships, getting to know people, and then figuring out where they fit, instead of having a goal of, I gotta get a sale, I gotta get a new client, I gotta whatever it is. Because the cool thing is, when we're networking and we're just meeting people, then we are open to figuring out how they fit into our world. And business growth always comes from it. It just comes from it in different ways. So some people are going to be really great referral sources. Some people are going to be great resources that we can provide to our community that just increases our value to them. Some might turn into clients or customers, might be fairly quick, could take years. It could happen never. And that's because not everyone we meet needs or wants what we have to sell. When we go to networking events thinking that they do, we end up putting off this vibe that, we are a lion and they are dinner, and no one likes that. So let's not do it. So let's go back to the pages of the book. Some people think the internet is for selling. While you all want to sell your products or services, you have to remember that there is one right way and one wrong way to do it. I think some people believe there's a difference because you aren't physically in front of people. We're going to explore that. I can't express this enough, that the rule of thumb in sales is that relationships come first. If you adopt this idea from the beginning, you will approach the process from the right direction every time. The question becomes how to build those relationships online. For starters, think about what you want in a client. When you have an idea of what a good client looks like, ask yourself how you've obtained the good clients you already have. Most likely you did the work to build the right relationship with them or with the referral partner first. Go with that policy. You can also refer back to the Embrace Your Target Market chapter, where we discuss this in more detail. When it comes to online prospecting, consider these steps. First, identify prospective targets. Once you have a target, find out where they are online and start building a relationship. Notice that I didn't say anything about selling them. That's because you can't. Just like in-person sales, you have to get to know them and their issues before you can propose a solution. The internet is not your license to email prospects with your pitch. Frankly, that will do more damage than good. So, here's what I think we're going to do. We're going to explore. Should have done this for an hour. Oh, okay. So we were talking about how we're networking, what's working and what isn't. Thanks so much for joining me. If you've got a great networking hack, would love to see it. The situation we're in has been sort of challenging for some people because they're used to networking in person. And my viewpoint is, okay, but you gotta turn it around to what can you be doing virtually? And now that states are starting to open up, are there things that you can do where you are meeting people? One of the ideas that I am throwing out there is to think about your connections or people in your overall community and find, let's say, 4 people who you would like to get to know better and you think there would be value in them knowing each other, and convene a meeting. That meeting can be in person. That See, Anne, that meeting can be in person. That meeting could be virtual. It could start out virtual, and then it could go to in person. We have a lot of options right now, and we want to be respectful of what's going on in the world and the limitations that we have on doing things personally. But I think there's real value in putting together just a small group of people who might get real benefit from getting to know each other and pulling them together and just having a conversation. Should there be structure to it? Yeah, probably. People need to know why you think this would be a good grouping. And there should be no expectation of any sort of outcome other than let's talk. Maybe it's around a topic so that it's sort of a brainstorming session kind of thing. But hey, it can be valuable. It can be tremendously valuable to have those sorts of smaller gatherings that are not as difficult in this situation, but that can be pretty impactful. We have an opportunity to really do some serious relationship building right now if we're looking at networking from the right direction. And for me, the right direction is to build relationships with people, to find those people who we think would add value to our community, could add value to our business, people who we feel an engagement with, people who we feel we want to get to know better, people who we respect, or that we are learning to respect. It's varied. And I think we all have those people in our network who maybe we haven't had an opportunity to really have a deeper conversation with. And now we have the time, potentially, we have the technology. We can do it in person or we can do it virtually. So we have a lot of options. I just think we have to remember that why we're doing it, what the goal is, I guess, is what I would say. And then think about, what's going to change moving forward. Earlier, I suggested that I'm not sure we'll be handing out business cards as frequently, which wouldn't be a bad thing, but doesn't necessarily, in some cases, might make it a little more difficult to further the conversation. So we have to get creative. We're probably not going to be shaking hands. We probably won't be attending really large events for a while. So how can we be building our network in meaningful ways? Because it's that network that helps us grow our business. We have to be continually growing our network. We have to be meeting people, exploring and finding those folks who we feel a resonance with, who we want to pull into our orbit, to our community, because there's, something that's going to be beneficial on both ends. So, now's a really good time to think about it because it's going to change as we roll out. We want to be ready for it. We don't want to be waiting to see what happens. That those are my, thoughts on this. Any input would be great because this, hopefully is a conversation as opposed to a, what do they call those things? Monologue. Okay. All right, well.